Welcome to the Gray Area Podcast. Kevin Gray here, Mavs pre and post host on 97.1 The Freak. Of course, it is the Gray Area Interview Wednesdays here. Appreciate you joining me on my YouTube channel here at Kevin Gray Sports, or if you're listening to the podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts for free. Make sure you give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. Tell your friends, tell your family, hey, to download the Gray Area Podcast and check it out. Episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It is Interview Wednesdays, and it's playoff time in the National Football League. And I couldn't think of anyone better to join me on this Wednesday than someone who Cowboys fans have come to know and love. Some even call them their king these days on television. And he covers the NFL for Fox Sports. Proud LSU Tiger, my man David Helman of Fox Sports, joining me here on the Gray Area. David, what's going on?
I never feel better about myself than when you intro me for something, KG. So I'm good, man. It's playoff time. Ready for a busy January and hopefully a really fun Super Bowl after that.
It's been a wild season so far in the league. Just the amount of stars that we've seen, some of the surprise guys that we didn't think were going to make a name for themselves. The one that immediately comes to mind is Puka Nacua in Los Angeles, the star rookie wide receiver who's breaking all kinds of records. But obviously, you know, for you cover the league on a daily basis now, not just the Cowboys with your primary role there, but you cover the NFL on a daily basis with the Fox NFL podcast. What has this season been like for you, diving into not just the Cowboys, but all of these teams on a daily and weekly basis in the league?
I got to tell you, man, I already had a lot of respect for people that cover the NFL, like league wide, but the last 2 years have really given me such a greater appreciation for how hard that really is. And like, don't get me wrong, covering a team is its own challenge. Like when you cover the Cowboys, for instance, I mean, obviously we know that's a 24-hour news cycle all of its own. You got to be responsible for all of that. That's tough, but stepping outside of that world and needing to know everything about everyone, needing to have an informed opinion about everything that's happening with every team, it's exhausting. And yeah, I mean, you know, of course you're going to keep an eye on the Cowboys. Of course you want to know what's going on in the big markets. But like, you know, you mentioned Puka Nacua. This is a great example of what I'm talking about. It's like Puka, amazing story. He takes the league by storm. You feel like you've got a good handle on the Rams. And then all of a sudden here, over the last 2-3 weeks, come to find out, the LA Rams have an NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year candidate as well. Their defensive tackle, Kobe Turner, is having like the most amazing rookie season for a third-round pick. You know, he's playing next to Aaron Donald, doing a hell of a job in his own right. And if you're not on top of it, you have no idea that was ever happening. And like when it's your job to tell people about the entire league, like you can't afford to let that stuff slip. So like it feels like every time you feel like you've got a good handle on what's going on, there's some new storyline creeping up on you. So yeah, we were talking about it before the interview. Like now that we're into the playoffs and it's 14 teams, and then next weekend it'll be even less teams than that. Like I'm looking forward to it. This should be easy compared to trying to keep track of all 32 teams for 18 weeks.
The NFL has found a way to put a chokehold on what is television ratings, the drama that is the league every single day, and what they're the best week-to-week drama that you can find right now, it feels like, in television, because no matter what happens on a week-to-week basis, either we overreact or we don't react enough to what may have happened in a particular game to try to give us an informed opinion on what may happen in the next game. But now we're to the point in the playoffs where all of that information that we've gathered throughout the course of the year, in some ways, may not even play itself out because of what may happen in the playoffs, again, adding to the drama that is the National Football League.
It's so good, dude. Like the meme, I think in memes, like social media has broken my brain. Like, yes. You know the meme that goes around where it's like people you just flip between thinking it's so over and we're so back. You know what I'm
Yes,
talking about?
yes,
That's
yes.
that's every team in the NFL like every month, you know, and like you can see it with every team. Like nobody thought the Rams were worth a damn when the season started. Now everybody thinks the Rams are the team that you don't want to play. The
Mm-hmm.
Niners have looked amazing all season long, except they had a 3-game losing streak where everybody was like, see, these guys are frauds. I mean, you can go down the list. The Cleveland Browns, like, how over did it look for
Yes.
the Browns? Like, they're like, oh my God, we're going to have to watch PJ Walker play every week from now until freaking until January. And now they're like this crazy hot team. Like, it all matters, but like to contextualize the whole thing, you know, I mean, you go back to the Cowboys opponent, you know, the Packers, like how bleak did it look for Green Bay, even as
Mm-hmm.
recently as like 3 or 4 weeks ago when they lost to Tommy DeVito on Monday Night Football. You're
That's
like, oh
right.
my God, these guys are bums. They had a shot at the playoffs and they blew it. And now they're here anyway. And everybody's like, oh, I don't know if you want to play the Packers. Like it's,
Hell, we're doing the same with Buffalo right now, who's rattled off 5 straight games.
yeah.
Looked like a month and a half ago they were dead in the water. Then all of a sudden they look like the team in the AFC that you quote unquote don't want to see in the playoffs at this point.
The only team in the league that didn't really go through these existential crises this year was Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
But even all three of Baltimore's real losses, like this last one doesn't count because they sat everybody, but all three of their real losses were some of the dumbest stuff you've ever seen in your life. Like they lose in overtime to the Colts because there's some bad officiating and some missed field goals. They gave up I think they had a 17-3. No, I'm sorry. They had a 10-0 lead on Pittsburgh
Mm-hmm.
in the fourth quarter and managed to let that slip away. And then they had they had a double-digit lead on Cleveland in the fourth quarter. They let that slip away too. Like their losses are the dumbest losses humanly imaginable, and that's the best team in the league. So,
And 2 of those teams are playoff teams. So
yeah,
in the grand scheme of things, it maybe not be that bad.
yeah, that's a great point, dude. That's the other part of this too. Is like in October when you let it slip to the PJ Walker or the whatever it was, the Dorian Thompson Robinson
Mm-hmm.
Browns, whoever was starting for Cleveland back then. Ravens fans are like, oh my God, I can't believe we let one slip to this sorry Browns team. And now here in mid-January, you're like pumping your chest, like, yeah, we only lost to playoff teams. Like that's what's
That's
up.
right.
Like the way that all of this context just changes and twists and turns itself around is always really funny.
Before we get to the Cowboys, it's funny because some of the matchups, when you look at what's set up for Wild Card Weekend, I said on my show Monday, I was like, look, man, the NFL script writers were on fire this past weekend because the amount of matchups that we could have based on what happens in the playoffs, you have an opportunity to maybe see the Cleveland Browns, if things break a certain way, go visit the Baltimore Ravens in the divisional round. And this weekend alone, you've got the ultimate revenge game with the Lions and the Rams, with Matthew Stafford taking on his former club in Detroit, Matt and Jared Goff doing the same thing, facing his former club in the Rams. Tyreek Hill gets to go play in Kansas City, where he used to play. Like, there's so many amazing storylines. And I didn't even get to the Packers and the Cowboys one with the whole Mike McCarthy deal. Like, there's just so many things this weekend that you can think of that could be a favorite storyline if you pick one.
We are often prisoners to the moment, and I'm guilty of it too. I'm not blaming anybody else. And like I think the thing that's happening now is like the best thing or the coolest thing or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But man, this is the 11th NFL playoffs that I've covered personally, and I've been a fan of football my entire life before that. So I mean, I've got some experience doing this, and I can't remember a year where it all looked this good, like the whole thing looks this good. Like usually there's a team where it's like, oh yeah, but they lost their quarterback 2 weeks before the season ended and like nobody really takes them seriously, or there's a team that just like overachieved and shouldn't be here. But like every team in this thing has a compelling storyline. Even the one team that maybe you think doesn't is the Steelers.
Yes.
But the Steelers are going up to play Buffalo in January, and the Bills are the most inconsistent team in the NFL. Like, the Bills can play an amazing game just as easily as they can turn the ball over 4 times and lose to the Jets, which is a thing that happened this year. So even that game has intrigue because you never know for sure which Bills team you're going to get. And then all of the rest of these games are just incredible. Like, obviously there's not actually script writers, but I was thinking about this. I was thinking about this on Sunday afternoon because the Cowboys had control of that game against Washington, like by the third quarter, like from the third quarter onward, you were very confident. All right, Dallas is going to get the 2. They'll host the 7 seed. And so then Green Bay takes control against Chicago, like late in the fourth. Like, it was only 17-9, but it kind of felt inevitable that that's where it was heading. So, Green Bay is probably in, and Dallas is the 2. And then the result of this Niners-Rams game is going to decide, like, who winds up going where. And I can't write off the possibility that the league office was, like, on the phone with people in Santa Clara. They're like, hey, Kyle Shanahan, let the Rams score. And then when they score, just give up. Just don't try to win the game. Because, like, if the Rams go ahead and these scores hold, we get McCarthy versus the Packers and we get Stafford in Detroit. Like, that's what we want. Like, I can't write off the possibility that the league was like, Kyle, you got the bye week anyway, dude. Just let them score.
Just let it ride, man. It's good. We're good here.
And like, especially in the NFC, I think this is the best wild card weekend ever. It's definitely the best wild card weekend since we moved to the 7-team format. I think this is the 4th year that we've had 3 matchups in the wild card round. So you get Packers Cowboys, 3rd time in the last 10 years, 1st time with McCarthy going against his old team. Jordan Love's first playoff game, Dak trying to keep the momentum rolling. Obviously, Stafford and Goff going against each other with their new teams. Like, that speaks for itself. First Lions home playoff game since Jimmy Johnson was coaching Dallas, because that's who they beat. And then Eagles Bucks isn't quite as sexy as the other 2, but like, even that, are the Eagles going to find
the intrigue of that game, Dave? I think the intrigue of that game is Philadelphia ultimately going to collapse the way that they've done over the last several weeks? I think it's the intrigue of that one, possibly.
Well, so exactly, like, are the Eagles going to dig deep and find a way out of this, or are they going to go from 10-1 to 11-7 and didn't even make a peep in the playoffs? Like, that would be one of the worst collapses in NFL history. Yeah. And on the flip side, let's give some credit to Tampa. Like, if the Buccaneers do find a way to win it, now you're talking about a team just like the Rams that was like on the short list of most irrelevant teams coming into the season. Like, nobody wanted anything to do with the Bucs, and they would make it to the final 8 of the season. And that would be incredible too. So, like, there's so much good stuff going on this weekend. And that's just one side of the bracket. We didn't even talk about the other side. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was thinking about the AFC a little bit as you were ending there, and I was thinking about, man, so if things break the right way and let's just say things hold the way that they do, we have Baltimore hosting the Houston Texans. By the way, DeMeco Ryans, in my mind, should be unanimous coach of the year. I know Kevin Stefanski and what he was able to hold together in Cleveland deserves consideration, but what DeMeco Ryans did in Houston with a rookie quarterback, Will Anderson, was really good for them this year too, rushing the quarterback. To me, he's the hands-down coach of the year, and it really shouldn't be a question in my mind based on what he did down there.
So I agree with you. I think if I don't have a vote, but if I had a vote, I think I would vote for DeMeco, just because of like how disgusting the vibes were in Houston before this. Like, you talk about, like, as bad as it feels in Carolina right now, that's what it felt like in Houston for like 2 or 3 years. And like, no hope. black cloud hanging over the franchise with the Deshaun Watson situation and the trade and the fact that like he didn't even want to play there before the trade happened. So I'm rambling, but like I think I would vote for him, but I can't agree with unanimous. And I've been thinking about this.
Ooh.
I've been thinking about this a lot, dude. Like I don't think there's ever been a year where there are so many deserving coaches. Like typically we can settle on like 2 or 3 that deserve mention. I can get up to 8 that have a
Ooh,
great.
wow.
I can get you to like 8. Okay, D'Amico speaks for himself. Kevin Stefanski coached the Browns to 11 wins with 5 quarterbacks. That's insane.
That is insane.
I'm going to give some love to Shane Steichen. I know the Colts didn't make the playoffs, but he got them to a winning record and within a game of the playoffs. And quick, name like 3 Indianapolis Colts. Like I can do it because it's my job to cover the league, but like
I got 3 and a possible. I got you. I got Gardner Minshew. I got you Jonathan Taylor. I got you Michael Pittman. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah,
I mean, DeForest Buckner's an incredible D tackle. Like
there you go.
There are good players on their team, but like this ain't like an all-star roster. And by the way, they lost Anthony Richardson. So like at least D'Amico had CJ Stroud. Shane Steichen slapped this thing together with gum and toothpicks and had them almost in the playoffs. I think Sean McVay deserves a mention. Again, like the Rams were widely considered to be a team that was going to be fighting for a top 5 draft pick.
Low key, I could probably throw Mike Tomlin in there too, since we're naming the other guys. I could probably throw him in there too.
Mike Tomlin always deserves a mention for dragging that team into a winning record. There's somebody else I really wanted to make sure I mentioned. This is unpopular, but Kyle Shanahan and John Harbaugh at least deserve mention. Like to enter a season with playoff expectations and to deliver that well. I mean, the Niners are arguably like the greatest offense we've seen since the greatest show on turf. I mean, that's good coaching, is it not? Oh, and then the last guy that I would want to mention, obviously Dan Campbell, like first year ever that there's major expectations on the Detroit Lions coming into a season. Like, oh, can you build off the momentum of last year? Win 11 games, win the division for the first time in 30 years, playoff football in Detroit for the first time since Barry Sanders. Like, yeah, he's a pretty deserving candidate too. So like, I don't envy the people that have to decide on this, but I think at the end of the day, I think D'Amico or Stefanski will win. And I think they're both very deserving.
The last one I'll throw in there is probably Matt LaFleur from Green Bay to take one of the youngest teams in the league with Jordan Love and the expectations surrounding him taking over, obviously, for Aaron Rodgers. And I'm sure in some ways Green Bay is looking over at New York like, oh boy, it looks like we made the right decision to move on from that Aaron Rodgers thing, because here we are in the playoffs and there's Aaron Rodgers, having a battle with Jimmy Kimmel on Pat McAfee every day.
Keep in mind too, the Minnesota Vikings lost Kirk Cousins for the season before Halloween, and they were mathematically alive for the playoffs on the final day of the season. And that's without they didn't have Justin Jefferson for like 2/3 of the season. Like he was out for 6 or 7 weeks. So a hell of a lot of coaches did a really good job this season. I guess that's my point. But yeah, like I said, I think D'Amico and Stefanski are probably they're deserving front runners.
Well, let's turn our attention to the Cowboys, because that's what the people came here for David Helman and the Cowboys. Because for Mike McCarthy, I want to start here. We talk about, the best coaches in the league. Mike McCarthy now, in his last 3 seasons, has won 36 games. My man is 21 games over 500 and has put himself in position where he has now got this team. If we were talking about any other team, David, a team that in 1 year lost in the wild card round, then they lose in the divisional round. Yes, it was to the same team, but they took another step. And then this year, they are now the number 2 seed with a chance to host not 1, but 2 playoff games. And if things break their way, could be hosting the NFC Championship game later on in January. For you, how did we get here with this team based off of what we thought this team was going to be coming into this year as a defensive-led team? And then they realized, oh, that's right, Dak Prescott is still really good at this quarterback thing. And then once CeeDee Lamb tells us, hey, throw me the damn ball, then we figure this thing out going forward from there.
I mean, God bless whoever had and I can't wait to find out. Like, I haven't heard definitively. It's the type of stuff that usually comes out like way after the fact. Like after a couple people have changed jobs and it's not so fresh, somebody'll catch the decision makers over a glass of Johnny Walker Blue at the combine and they'll get the real story. But I gotta know, after that fiasco in San Francisco, clearly something changed. Like, clearly there was a come to Jesus moment where the Cowboys realized, like, Dak Prescott in this passing game is what's going to get us out of this rut. And I think he had either 4 or 5 passing touchdowns through the first 5 weeks of the season. And he finished with 36 after that. So do the math on how the average changed there. And like I said, was it Mike McCarthy self-scouting and being like, you know what, this isn't working the way I thought it was? Was it Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones saying, yeah, we know that we like to play power football, but not at this cost, not if it's going to lead us to an 8-9 record? Was it Dak Prescott saying, like, what in the actual hell is going on? Like, put the ball in my hands. It was probably some combination of all of the above, if I had to guess. But whatever it was, it clearly worked. I mean, the offense completely transformed from that point on. And I've been trying to say this often over the last week or two, but I think it bears mentioning. Like, Dak Prescott is doing this not by himself, but Dak Prescott is like the fulcrum of the Cowboys' success in a way that I don't know that he's ever been before. Like, there were always other elements. And don't get me wrong, CeeDee Lamb is an amazing player, and that's a big part of it. But the Cowboys are winning
they're winning because of him. They're winning.
Thank you for making that easier for me. They are winning because of Dak Prescott. Like, the offensive line is fine. The running game maybe is trending in a better direction, but it really hasn't been there all season long. And it hasn't stopped them from being the most efficient third down offense in the league, one of the best offenses in the league when it comes to finishing drives with points. And it's all Dak Prescott. So, like I said, I don't know what changed, but thank God it did, because I think the tenor of these conversations would be a lot different otherwise.
And I think for Cowboys fans and NFL fans in general who are either detractors of Dak Prescott or even supporters of him, have been waiting to see if he could be the engine that drives this team offensively to winning football games despite anything that may be going on around him. Because what do we talk about with the best quarterbacks in the NFL? Are you the reason that you can overcome, no matter if it's a bad defense or whatever the case may be? Can you find a way to win games? And Dak Prescott, at least it feels perception-wise, for the first time in his career, that he was the reason why you looked at the Cowboys week in and week out and said they're winning games because 4 is out here balling week in and week out, and he's got a number 1 bona fide wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb, who, despite all the things that we thought coming into the season with leaning on the run game and on the defense, those 2 individuals said, no, actually, we'll take this thing over and we'll lead this offense and lead this team to where they need to go this year.
Yeah, that's a really good. I mean, we should make sure we throw old 88 in there as well, because he politely was like, give me the – can I curse on here?
Sure.
Give me the fucking rock. Like, give me the ball. And like, as politely as I've ever seen it done in my life, like, he was just like, well, do y'all want to win? Then if you do, maybe I should touch the ball. And they've been doing it ever since. I agree with you. I still, it's not fair. I always try to preface it by saying that, like, I feel sorry for Cowboy fans, because it's not fair, but it's all going to hinge on what happens next. Because I do agree with you that, yeah, I think people are coming around on Dak in a way that, smart, informed, ball-knowing fans, I would argue, have always felt this way about Dak, but I think he is playing at a level where now it's undeniable. I think he's at least he's at least got he's got a good shot to be all pro this year, and you can't completely write him off the MVP conversation, even though that feels kind of like a long shot right now. So yeah, I mean, you get to a certain point, and I think it's undeniable where people have to give him his props. But the problem is he plays for the Dallas Cowboys. And, people are going to be waiting in the wings to jump if, God forbid, if they don't show up against Green Bay, or even
Oh my gosh.
even if they lose in the divisional round. So it's like a house of cards, like it looks really great right now, but let it not look great in the playoffs, and it's going to come tumbling down. And that's not fair. I want to say it one more time. It's not fair, but that's the life of a Cowboys fan and of the Dallas Cowboys is until you get that monkey off your back, people are going to hold it against you every opportunity they have.
And it's hard to change perception, I feel like, for a quarterback this deep into his career, because we're talking about he's in year 8 now. And yet he's playing at a level that we perceive for other quarterbacks, whether it be Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, take your pick of upper echelon quarterback, if you will, that once you get 2 to 3 years in, we're saying, okay, he's part of the top 1 tier of the league. And yet now at this point in his career, he's getting to that point, which makes you look at a guy like Trevor Lawrence, for example, thinking, hey, man, what's going on with you over there in Jacksonville? Because you were supposed to take the step with this team this year and it didn't happen. It just shows you how difficult it is. What I'm getting to is how difficult it is to play quarterback in this league and play at a high level for a consistent period of time to even have the opportunity to change perception in people's minds based on success or lack thereof when you play quarterback in this league.
I could go on and on about it, man. I could go on and on about it of like, we spend so much time arguing about this dumb sport where like you get to play one game, you get to do it one time, and like the bounce of a couple balls or a couple of decisions that maybe you want to do over again, they can swing a game, but they'll swing your whole career. I've been thinking about this because it looks like Bill Belichick's going to be done in New England. Nothing official has happened. I guess we'll see. But like you go back to fledgling Tom Brady's career when he's just the backup trying to hold the rope. And they beat Oakland in that Tuck Rule game 16-13. 16-13. So what? That's like a touchdown and 3 field goals. Am I doing the math there right? Like And they have that crazy rule go in their favor, and now they're in the Super Bowl. And then Bill Belichick puts together an amazing defensive game plan. They hold the greatest show on turf to 17 points. And if my memory serves, the Rams scored like 14 of those points in the fourth quarter. Like they held them down. Like the Patriots defense did work that night. And Brady, obviously, he drives them for the game-winning points, and kudos to him. But like, if any of that stuff goes wrong, now it's like, oh, he's a young guy. He couldn't quite get us over the hump. Maybe, he probably gets a chance to stay the starter, but it's not the same thing. And maybe the rest of it is completely in jeopardy, So it's crazy to think about stuff like that. And I'm rambling again, but I'm looking at it right here. Speaking of Tom Brady, like, Tom Brady morphed into Freakazoid Tom Brady, the one, he morphed into that Tom Brady in 2007.
Yes.
You want to know how old he was?
I want to say, I'm going to take a guess. I'm going to say he was 30 at the time.
He was 30, KG. He was.
Yeah.
Drew Brees, he started hitting his peak in New Orleans a little bit earlier, but in 2008, at the age of 29, he started a streak of 7 straight Pro Bowls, and that's when the Saints won their Super Bowl. Like, this stuff isn't.
So what are you
linear.
trying to tell me, Dave? What are you trying to tell me about Dak Prescott here? What are you trying to tell me?
No. Don't put words in my mouth. But like, this stuff isn't linear. And like, for every Patrick Mahomes where it just kind of hits and goes, there's a dozen other guys who, like, maybe you ascend to your peak when you're 28, 29, 30. look, I'm going to get out in front of it right now. People that are jumping off the Trevor Lawrence bandwagon, I'm going to stay right where I'm at because the dude he's 20 freaking 3 years old, probably. Like, how old is this dude? I'm looking it up live on the podcast. He's 20. He just turned 24 during the season.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying he's like the best quarterback in the league, but like, we're going to give up on that talent and what he's shown so far in his career. I'm not. Like, you go right ahead. If y'all aren't sold on it, I'm not doing that. So yeah, I think, that's boring and it doesn't lend itself to a useful hot take, but this stuff isn't linear, and sometimes it takes these guys time. Sometimes it takes teams time to put the right roster around a quarterback. And it's great if you get a Mahomes and you're just ready to go from the jump. That's obviously awesome, but it only works that well for like one guy per generation, and everybody else has to kind of figure it out. And again, don't put words in my mouth, but like, look, I mean, Dak's just now 30 years old. If he avoids any more crazy injuries, like, maybe he can play at this high of a level. You would like to think he could do it for at least 4 or 5 more years. If he's really lucky, maybe he could do it for another decade. So that stuff's all kind of been kicking around in my mind recently, where I'm like, hey man, nobody's career path is the same. And maybe if the Cowboys are really fortunate, this is the start of a really special run for Dak Prescott. I don't know that that's going to happen, but it's an interesting thing to think about when you're thinking about winning playoff games and stuff like that.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because it feels like a full circle type of moment, not just for him, but obviously for Mike McCarthy, where we started this at, because for McCarthy now, he has a chance to beat the team that he took to a Super Bowl at AT&T Stadium, by the way back when, and be able to move this team forward and really, I think, solidify his place as being stable here on this job. Because I'm of the opinion, while he should keep this job with the kind of stability he's brought for this organization over the past 3 seasons, they haven't won 12 games in a row for 3 years since the Jimmy Johnson days. Like, that's how much stability is around here now in Dallas. It still will not shock me if the Cowboys, if they lost, let's say in the wild card round or even in the divisional round, that they look at Mike McCarthy and said, you know what? Thank you for your service. We really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the responsibility and moving Kellen Moore out of here and taking the reins on the offense. But Bill Belichick's sitting out here potentially, and we might want to go in that direction. It would not shock me if they do that. I think it would be the wrong move, but it wouldn't shock me in that case. Would it shock you if the Cowboys, even with all the success that they've had, look at Mike McCarthy and say, you know what? It's time for us to move on in a different direction?
It would shock me, and I'm not gonna go double barrel and just say that I think it's insane, because enough people that I respect have floated it. Like, the great Peter King put that in his weekly column this week after week 18, where he was like, "Is Jerry Jones keeping his options open for Bill Belichick?" So if Peter King thinks it at least can't be crazy. I still think it's wrong, though. I still don't think it's right. Just because, again, I think that stability is hard to come by. Like, Jerry's been looking for it for a long time, and I'll take a minute to pat myself on the back. Like, when Mike McCarthy got hired, I said, obviously, the goal is to win the Super Bowl, and that'll be the thing that determines how successful anybody is. But short of that, the way that Mike McCarthy could really put his stamp on the Cowboys is just getting them to that level of sustainability that the Packers had when Mike McCarthy was there, where like every year in September, the Cowboys are going to be in the dance, and we'll see what happens in January. And you couldn't count on that for 20 years. Like, Bill Parcells got close, and then, he got burned out and didn't want to do it anymore. And then after that, it was anybody's guess. It was like, okay, well, are they going to get to the playoffs, or are they going to flame out and crumble under the weight of their own expectations? Like, we saw it happen with Wade Phillips. We saw it happen with Jason Garrett. So to achieve this almost like boring level of stability, seriously, like,
yeah,
Like, I was thinking about when we were talking about Coach of the Year a few minutes ago, I was like, I can imagine some Cowboy fans being like, well, how come nobody mentioned Mike McCarthy? And I'm just like, well, this is what they were supposed to do. Like, they did
Yes.
what they were supposed to do. But none of his predecessors recently have been able to do what they were supposed to do. So I think there's value in that. I think it would be rash to throw that away over playoff disappointment. But having said that, you lose in the wild card round to a 7 seed to a guy that's never started a playoff game. That's going to sting. That's really going to sting. And so,
especially to that team, to the Packers of all teams. Yes,
you're not wrong. So I don't think you can completely rule it out. But like, I mean, look, I'm not trying to disparage the greatest coach of all time. I think the world of Belichick, and it honestly annoys me how people are trying to like write him off like he never accomplished anything because it's been bad in New England. But like, having said that, the Cowboys are going to have some work to do here when this season's over, whatever happens. Like, whether they lose Sunday or whether they win the Super Bowl, they're going to have some work to do with figuring out Dak's contract, handing out these major extensions to CD and Micah, replenishing the rest of the talent. Like, what are you going to do about Stephon Gilmore? What are you going to do about some of the elements of your pass rush? What are you going to do about your offensive line? Like, what's the future look like for Tyron Smith and Tyler Smith and all this other stuff? So the Cowboys have some work to do to stay on this level when this season is over. And I think I'd like my odds better of kind of trying to keep that nucleus together rather than just say, all right, we're going to bring in the greatest coach of all time who is assuredly got an ego and assuredly has a strong opinion about the way we want to do things. I just, that sounds like a big ask to me. So I would be shocked. I would be shocked if it happened, but you can't completely rule anything out if the Cowboys get embarrassed this weekend, because that's going to be gross. That's going to be it's going to be a really toxic news cycle if the Cowboys don't find a way to win this game.
No, I agree. And you started to touch on it a little bit on why I feel like this run for the Cowboys this postseason is so important, because you mentioned all of the possible changes that are possibly coming for this team. And you talked about it not just from, a personnel standpoint. I'm looking at the staff. Hello, Dan Quinn, who I'm going to pose this question to you because I've been trying to think about this question and pose it to others. How long do you think Dan Quinn is going to continue to say no when head coaching opportunities continue to knock on his door and there are opportunities that may be too good for him to pass up? Because I know, obviously, the Jerry Jones is like, look, man, we're going to make you one of the highest paid assistants in the league so you can stay around here. Mike McCarthy wants you back. We want you back. But there's only 32 of these jobs in the NFL. How much longer will Dan Quinn, who's turned this defense around and the culture of this team on that side of the ball around, continues to say no? Because I don't know if he's going to continue to say no, especially if they find a way to make a deep playoff run this year.
I think I've been wrong the first 2 times because I didn't think he'd stay. I didn't think he'd stay either of the last 2 years. But I think this will be it for Dan Quinn, because not only everything you just said is true. Like, he changed the culture. It's been one of the best defenses in the league over the last couple of years. On and on and on. He's got head coaching experience. Like, he should be an attractive candidate. But I think this year offered you a glimpse at, like, not for long. Like, how long can your star shine bright in the NFL? Because we're already seeing it. Like, some of it's injuries. It's not all Dan's fault, but like, this Cowboys defense over the last like 6-8 weeks has not been, what it was. Like, it's not what you think about when you think about it over the last 2 years, just like breathing fire, forcing 4 turnovers every week. Like, really, Thanksgiving was probably the last time that they just looked like a force. So like, if I'm Dan Quinn, I'm like, okay, like, I've squeezed just about all the juice I can out of this right here. And if I stay around a little bit longer, then I might not get that head coaching interview this time next year. And a big part of it is like striking while the iron's hot. And I think Dan Quinn probably knows that. So if he gets interviews, if he gets offers this year, I think he probably goes because like at some point, if you wait too long, I think it kind of passes you by to a degree.
Yeah, him and Will McClay are going to be getting a bunch of interviews and opportunities because, I mean, when you win,
don't put that out there. No, I'm kidding. Actually, it's funny.
It's already out there. Will McClay got interviews already. Jay Quick will have interviews already.
It's so funny though. Like, I mean, if Dan Quinn leaves, like they can make a coaching hire, but like Will is such an integral part of the sauce here, and the fun. But it's a weird dichotomy because like I consider Will a friend. Like I worked there for 10 years. I know Will. Nobody busts my chops like Will McClay. Like he loves to rag on me. So like I want the best for him. Like if he wants to go take a general manager job, I'll be rooting for him harder than anybody. But at the same time, I'm like, Will, who's going to run the draft? Like who's going to keep all of these great players coming into the Cowboys building if you leave? Like I want what's best for him, but I also don't want him to leave. Basically, that's the conundrum.
I have an easy fix. Just name him president of football operations and give him a raise.
I was going to say every 12 months from now until forever, they're just going to find a new title for him. And that title will probably come with a 50% raise on whatever he's already making. So yeah, I think that gives them a good chance to keep him around for as long as they want, probably.
Yeah. Before we get out of here today, obviously for the Cowboys, it's a big playoff game for them. Every playoff game is big for them. But I keep thinking about it in the grand scheme of what has been taking place over the last few years and then going forward from here. I expect the Cowboys to win this game on Sunday. Then you go to the divisional round, you get to host the divisional round game, and then really all bets are off from there. Is this team – I had talked to Stephon Gilmore about this, about championship DNA and what does that look like and what do you know about it and when you see it. Do you think that this team, why is it different this time around? Out of all the other times that it may have quote unquote felt different, the Jimmy Johnson quote unquote curse has been lifted. Why is this different for this team this year based on who they are?
I mean, the blunt, harsh reality is that it's not until they prove that it's different. I mean,
yeah,
I've felt really good about several Cowboy teams going into the postseason, and we know where that's gone. So, I mean, I'll give you a less smarmy answer, I guess. I mean, you've got a quarterback that's playing as well as anybody in the league, maybe better. I mean, Dak Prescott this season is one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL. There's really no debating it. You've got a receiver who has transcended to the top of his position. You're playing at home, which favors the offense 10 times out of 10. You don't have to deal with crowd noise, all that type of stuff. Meanwhile, the best element of your defense, the pass rush, is also aided by playing at home. So those two things working in your favor should make you a tough out. The ability to get after their quarterback and your quarterback working in a comfortable environment, I think that's going to give them a huge, huge leg up. So I feel pretty damn good about the Cowboys in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. The funny thing is and look, I mean, it'll be a victory if the Cowboys get through to the NFC title game. Like at least prove that you can get there. But as good as I feel about this team, we all know who's probably waiting at the end of that road. They're still there. They wear red. They got gold helmets. Maybe they get upset and do some of the work for you. You know, that's a big part of it too. Like going back to the whole thing about like Tom Brady, we never stopped to talk about who wasn't in your way when you finally made a run. You know, like nobody ever talks about the years that like Peyton Manning lost in the wild card round, so Tom Brady didn't have to play him. I mean, Cowboy fans do, but most people don't talk about the fact. Most people don't talk about the fact that Jalen Hurts had to beat Daniel Jones and Josh Johnson in the playoffs last year. Like those were the big bad matchups in front of him. So, you know, maybe the Cowboys will get lucky. If the Niners get upset, that's how we'll really know that the curse is lifted.
Oh boy.
Can you imagine? But yeah, so that is what gives me pause, really, is just knowing that you're probably going to have to go out there and play them, and we'll see if it's any different this time around. But nobody, you're lying to me. You're lying to me if you're telling me you're like, yeah, I want to go out there and play the Niners and show them what we got. Like, that's what everybody was saying in week 5, and we know how that went.
That's
So,
right.
yeah, we'll see, man. Like, I feel really good about this team. I'm excited to see what they can do. But until they slay that dragon, I can't completely believe in them, just because that's a loaded San Francisco team that they're going to have to get through.
It's funny because thinking about the playoff road that the Cowboys could potentially have, they beat the Green Bay Packers in the wild card round. If things hold, if I remember correctly, that means the Lions would come to AT&T Stadium. That would be a hell of a rematch because of everything that already transpired the first time these two teams got together with the whole, I reported, I didn't report, never mind. All that stuff went down. And then if you find a way to get to the NFC title game, you would meet the San Francisco 49ers for the 3rd straight year in a row. It reminds me of the whole 90s all over again with the 49ers and Cowboys. It's just cyclical, it feels like at this point.
It would be like a tour through the 90s. Because, I mean,
yes.
Packers, who they played a million times, Niners, who they played a million times, and like I said earlier, even the Lions' only playoff win in recent memory came against Jimmy's Cowboys before the start of the dynasty. So, yeah, Pat Summerall and John Madden are smiling down somewhere.
Oh, boy. That's classic NFC stuff. Before I let you go, you are, for most Cowboys fans these days, their king of reason when it comes to this team. Have you finally embraced what that means for you as you go forward in your career now?
No, I'll never. I don't internalize compliments very well, but I will just say, it's like I take a lot of responsibility in like representing rational discourse about the Cowboys on a larger level. I know that can be hard to find in the modern media landscape. So I hold myself to a high standard of like Cowboy fans. Maybe you're not going to agree with everything I say, but at the very least, you know that it's coming from a genuine, rational place. So I take it very seriously. Like, I don't want to let y'all down. I don't think I have yet. And I'll just keep trying to do that.
You showed back up on Speak on FS1 that one time, because look, low key, we love James Jones. James Jones been handling his business. We looked around and was like, hey man, where is David Helman? Then you showed back up that one day. You dropped a take on Dak Prescott. It's like, our king is back. He has finally returned. He is here to bring and restore order to the Cowboys Nation when it comes to takes about this football team, particularly on that show, and just in general, based on how people talk about this football team.
I'll next time they call me, I'll make sure I let y'all know that it's happening. So
that's gonna be your must-watch episode ever. David Helman's back on the show. Y'all make sure you tune in to Speak on FS1. So you make sure that you please let us know. That would be great.
Yeah, great. I'll keep y'all apprised, and I'll just keep trying to keep it real, man.
David, tell the folks they can find you. What you got going on, man?
Please, it's going to be a busy month, y'all. The NFL on Fox podcast, find it wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you can go find us on YouTube. We talk the entire league. We talk plenty of Cowboys. I'm on Twitter at David Helman _. I'm there way too often. But please, if you're into NFL talk, go give us a follow on the NFL on Fox podcast. That would be great. Appreciate it.
And I mean this with all sincerity. David is one of the hardest working individuals in this business. He's extremely talented. And more importantly, he's a lot of fun to hang out with. And he has done an amazing job covering the National Football League. The Fox NFL podcast has been one of the best podcasts all season long. It feels like you've had all the Fox people between Greg Olsen, Jay Glaze. Like, you've had a whole host of your colleagues on that show. And it's been terrific watching you be able to put that together and have the success that it's had so far throughout the course of this year, man.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. They've gone out of their way to help me try to make it successful with Greg and Jay and we've had all the different broadcast crews on at one point or another, all of our writers. So I think January is going to be big. We got a lot of stuff planned, so I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we appreciate you hanging out with us today on the Gray Area Podcast. Make sure you find David on Twitter. What is it? David Helman _? Is that where you at? That's where you're
That's
at.
me. That's
You haven't
me.
changed it. Okay, good. Because you had me
Nah.
confused for a second with the handle on your screen there. So.
Oh, you're right. No, that's just my StreamYard screen name. But whatever.
Oh,
Just search for the annoying little guy on Twitter who talks about the Cowboys and LSU, and you'll figure it out.
Appreciate David Helman of Fox Sports for joining me here on the Gray Area Podcast today. You can listen to the podcast wherever you get podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like the video and subscribe to my channel here at Kevin Gray Sports. I'll be back on Friday with Reggie Attitilla for Friends Friday to get you ready for NFL Wildcard Weekend. Gonna have a lot of fun stuff to talk about as the Cowboys take on the Packers and all kinds of NFL storylines going into the weekend. So join me here on Friday. Again, thanks to David Helman of Fox Sports for joining me here on the Gray Area Podcast. My name is Kevin Gray, and I'll talk to you on Friday. Peace.